Streams of Light podcast. Chris Anthony with you here on a Wednesday afternoon. A beautiful day in Southern California, sunny skies, and man, life is great. I'm so grateful to be here. You know, I was thinking about live streaming and the way it's changed really, you know, the face of broadcasting. It used to be that you had to be on a show that was syndicated. We had a show like Coast to Coast with, it's still around, but it was really popular back when Art, whatever, I can't remember his last name, used to do it. And used to have these interesting shows, and it was coast to coast. But now we're like the end of the world to the end of the world. I mean, not in the end of the world in the sense of the world is about to end, but from one end of the world to the other, we are live streaming. And I was so excited when I had my first guest from Australia, a call-in guest a few months back. And that was just, it's kind of crazy to think that. We have people from India, we have people from all around the world that listen and want to get in on the podcast. So, you know, today I'm going to share with you an experience I had that I've been kind of holding on to for the last few months, just sort of thinking about it. It was an out-of-body experience I had where I flew into what was like a wormhole, like a tunnel. So I'm going to share that with you this afternoon. It's a very special day for me to share this, and I've waited for a while. I could have rushed out and shared it the next morning, but I wanted to kind of think about it, make some sense about it. And so the day has come. Today's the day. I'm going to share that with you, and I'm going to get started in just a few moments on that. But I will say this up front. If you're watching the live stream, do me a favor. Let me know you're there. Go ahead and send a like, and also maybe even a comment of where you're listening from. And for those who have had OBEs, an out-of-body experience, or for those who have had NDEs, a near-death experience, or any kind of astral travel experience, maybe even lucid dreaming, we might talk about the difference between the two. Consider possibly sharing your story with me. For those of you listening, my Quora friends who are listening, I did put the link on the posting to my WhatsApp business account. So I will be taking potentially call-ins if we have enough time. And if you're listening on Facebook Live, we have on the Streams of Light podcast page has a link to my WhatsApp on the top of the page there. And then I meant to put it in my YouTube link for the notes description, but I didn't put it down there. So you'll just have to either go over to Facebook Live or the Quora posting. Okay, so today I'm really putting it out there. As I was chatting with someone before this live stream started, I started to think about a comment that was made of, you know, there's a sense of vulnerability here. And for me to share this, and it's one thing to interview people who have had radical experiences or maybe a little questionable to some people. It's quite another thing for someone like me to share with you an experience. I just kind of put it out. I'm putting it out there. And one of the reasons why I'm doing that is because I know that it really doesn't matter what you think anymore. It really doesn't. Okay. Those days of complete being bound in ego fear have to end. They must end. And if I feel it, then that's all the more reason why I have to share it. Now, I will say this is a little bit of a disclaimer, or at least to maybe speak to some of those people out there who are maybe a little more, they might think I'm a little more grounded, I'm a little more rooted in science. If I were to be able to travel in time right now, and if I went back maybe 5 or 7 years, and then I watched a future event, that being this podcast or this live stream today, I would probably think that I'd gone a little crazy. And what I'm saying by that is I'm saying that as we progress, you know, as we have more and more experiences, the things to us that before seemed a little bit sketchy or a little bit weird, a little bit new agey or whatever you want to call it, those things become really, they become more acceptable because our experience has led us down that path. Our experience has led us down that path where we've had all these things happen. Things have changed in our life. Things have changed in our life in such a way that now we are maybe open or ready. And so I don't blame people for thinking, wow, this is kind of out there. The title, I Flew into a Wormhole, it was pretty much that. But here's the thing. If you're a science buff, and I don't I'm not saying there's none out there that are listening to this podcast, but if you're a science buff and you know about the Einstein theory of wormholes, then maybe my definition of a wormhole is not quite that one. It might just be a little more from the perspective of the pop culture definition of wormhole. So like you see in the movie theaters when like in a movie where someone travels, like Contact, where Jodie Foster's character travels through this like tunnel-like thing. It's probably a little more like that. But it's true. It happened to me, and I want to give a background. I also want to, I thank those who are listening and sending texts out there. It looks like we've got someone from Philadelphia. Is that right? Yeah. So thank you so much and hello to Amy as well. It's great to have you guys listening. And so I'm going to get to it. I got to give you the background of what happened to me before I had this radical experience. I had been sick I had a fever for about 3 or 4 days. It was a pretty tough time. This was back in August. And I do want to point out, though, that when I had this experience, I was not feverish. And therefore, sometimes when you get really bad fever, you can hallucinate and have delirium and things like that. So that wasn't the case here. And I hadn't been drinking or anything like that. So there was, there was no, for those more prone to explain away a more logical conclusion, I was not feverish and I was not drunk. Okay, but I had been sick. And I actually do think that's a setup for this kind of situation. In what way? I had, when you get sick, you don't feel good. And so obviously, you might be taking fever reduction medications, and you also might not be eating, you might not have quite the appetite that you normally do. I eat a lot of greens. I eat a lot of prana-rich foods, and I practice a lot of yoga. I do a lot of meditation, and I do a lot of energy work, and I do some esoteric yoga practices that push me in the direction of these things. So I want to say that. But that being said, even before I did all those things, I found that whenever I had an experience where I had been sick for a while, or maybe there were a couple times that I had a hangover that I had out-of-body experiences the next day. So, it's not like you have to be a spiritual warrior. The idea is that the mind has to be awake when you have these experiences. And so there's 2 camps out there. One of the camps thinks that you need to learn how to have these experiences, like how to project yourself out of the body. And then there's another camp out there that believes that these experiences are happening all the time, that you go nightly. And I tend to lean towards that one more. But they try and teach you how to stay awake, how to be conscious when these things are happening. But what happened to me was radical. So I'd had this fever, and thankfully the fever had broke. And as a matter of fact, that night I had went to bed early because I was so uncomfortable. This fever had been going on. I was so uncomfortable that I went to bed early, around 9 a.m., which is early for me. And so, of course, because I went to bed so early, I woke up about 3 a.m. And thankfully, at that point, no fever reduction medications and no fever at the time. So I was feeling good. So I sat up for a bit and read a book, which I think is important, because when you get up at that hour of around 3:34, that's the magic hour. I mean, the old term was the witching hour, but there's funny connotations with that. But that's the hour where the thin layer, the thin veil between this world and the next is at its thinnest. This is something that all traditions, all monasteries, all spiritual seekers sort of universally agree on. They can't always agree on what they feel about this or that or God or all these doctrinal thoughts, but many of them do agree that this is the magic hour. And so I was up at that hour, and the good thing is I read for a while. And what that did is it made it so I was awake. And I think that's very important, that I was awake for a little while, because a lot of times what happens is we'll wake up at that hour and then we'll start to have these experiences, and then we go back into a deep sleep and we go into total unconsciousness. So I'd been up for a while, and I think that was important. And so I've had these experiences before, but nothing quite like this one. Let me tell you, the tunnel that I went into was just phenomenal. After I read for about half an hour, I decided to lay back down, and I actually had the intention, because I was up at that hour, And because I was feeling that feeling, that the veil was thin and that I felt somehow close. If I was to look back, if any of you are into the cosmic anomalies of the planets lining up and things, the moons and all that stuff, I believe it was the 11th of August, so maybe look that up. But anyways, the veil was definitely thin. I could feel it. And one of the things that happened to me was I laid back down in my bed. I could feel my skin start to have that light, tingly feeling. And this is a feeling that I felt before when I've had out-of-body experiences, when I've had astral travel experiences. So I started to feel this tingly feeling. And then I started to feel it. This is the feeling that anyone who's projected out of the body or had out-of-body experiences before, if you've done it, a number of times, you know what that feeling is. It's the feeling that I'm about to leave my body. It's a vibration feeling that starts to come. Usually what I do is I focus on my hands and my feet, and I'll feel a nice tingling feeling there. And then you begin to feel it. The body is going to sleep, but your mind, your awareness, your consciousness, you're going to stay present with that. And so I start to feel that tingling in my hands and feet, and then I started to feel the vibration over my whole body. And this is the part that's a little scary for people who haven't done it before. The vibration gets very intense, and then it's actually like that movie Contact when she finally took out the seat in the capsule. If you've seen that movie, you know what I mean, where everything just released and went into a floating state. And so that's what happened at that point. Now, a lot of times we will dream and we'll have dreams we're flying. Well, lucid dreams, there is a difference between like lucid dreaming and out-of-body astral travel experiences. I can always tell. The telltale sign for me is when I feel those winds. When I say winds, I don't mean like necessarily like winds we have here, like in Southern California, you have Santa Ana winds or blowing offshore and you can kind of feel the wind. Not so much in that sense. It's a wind that is more based on the relative movement of your astral body. So as you begin to move, you will feel the progress. You feel yourself going, you feel that light, gentle astral wind. And so I started to feel that. Now, here's what happened. When I released in this experience, in this particular one, I was catapulted, like flying, like you wouldn't believe. I feel, for those who are into the chakras, it's hard for me to say, I feel like I went out of the crown chakra. And that might make sense to some of those who study a lot and like to link, descriptions to what chakras you exit from. So I was catapulted. I was catapulted. Oh, hello, Victoria from Washington. I've got the text popping up here, and they should pop up on the screen, but I don't see it. Anyways, so I was catapulted out of, that physical sensation of body. And I was flying down what appeared to be a tunnel. And I could see faintly colors. It looked like yellow and green colors. Not too far from, for those of you who've seen The Matrix, the interesting thing about it was I couldn't see that clear, but I will refer back to The Matrix here in a second. I saw colors faintly, but I knew I was in this tunnel. There was no doubt about that, and that I was moving very fast. It was like one of those bank depositories from the outside when you put the capsule in the tube and it just gets sucked. That was like that. It was like I was sucked out of my body and I was flying fast. And something told me deep down inside, almost like that still small voice, something told me, look up. So I took that to mean the same practice that I do when I meditate, which is called in the East, Shambhavi Mudra, but it's something that's practiced universally for all contemplatives and those who are practicing the contemplative practices of mindfulness, meditation, stillness. So I looked up and in, and lo and behold, everything became crystal clear. And as I was flying down this tunnel, I saw the colors brighter and more luminous than any color I've ever seen on this physical earth. The colors, again, were green and yellowish. And I saw the most phenomenal thing that I'd never seen before, but I did have a friend who told me he saw something, that when he shared his story with me, it reminded me of what I saw this time. I saw symbology. I don't think it was words, but it was hard for me to say. I was moving fast down the tunnel, but as I began to do a little research on it, some people call what I was seeing light code. Very fascinating, all the way down the tunnel. Interesting that it was similar to The Matrix in that sense, which if you remember the movie The Matrix, they had those long vertical columns. And this is what it was like in the sense that it didn't look exactly like The Matrix. Look, that was Hollywood. But I wouldn't be surprised if, a lot of the things that we see in the movies are based on experiences people have, and whether they're meditators or DMTers, it doesn't really matter. It's just things that have happened. And so light code, symbology of some sort. And so I flew down this tunnel to the end so fast, and then I came to a juncture. And I decided, instead of telling the rest of the story from my recollection by heart, when I woke up, I took detailed notes on this experience. Sometimes I'll do a voice recording. In this case, I wrote it down. And I think what I'd like to do is read it at this point, because it's too important for me to just talk off the top of my head. But I do want to say that at this point, I was completely 110% aware of who I was, where I was, even though I wasn't quite sure, why I was there at the moment. I knew that I'd been sick in my bed for a few days. I didn't feel like I was deathly ill. I wasn't grasping for breath. I had continued to do my meditations, my breathing exercises. So, for those who, it's possible, it's always possible that you have a moment where the heart stops. Of course, the meditation that I practice, the Kriya Yoga practice, is all about moving energy up and down the spine and in the cerebral area, and creating powerful magnets that will pull the energy out of the sense organs and reduce the diaphragm breathing rate and the heart rate. And so it's not uncommon for people that are more advanced than me to have moments where the heart comes to a very slow beat, or even a breathless to semi-breathless state. These are things that have been documented. So some might think that I had an NDE, and I'm not totally against that idea, although I don't think it was. I think I just sort of cheated a little bit into perhaps an environment that, it's not as common to go to on a regular basis, because I've had other experiences that were more astral, more universe looking than this. So I'm flying down the tunnel, and I'm going to read to you the rest, because it's important to me, as I said, for me to give you the exact words that I wrote down about what happened, because I talked to people, I saw people, and that's very important to me to get that right. So I went so fast and then finally stopped. I felt as if I had traveled, as I said before, in one of those old-fashioned bank tubes, and now I was at some sort of juncture station. It was like a subway stop of sorts. I saw people who were just like me, just arriving, but also there were workers. Like anything in life, you can tell who the staff is by the vibe, the way they dress and talk and help. That's like when you walk into a busy restaurant and there's people everywhere. Even if the staff isn't uniformed, you can usually tell by their disposition, by the way they scan the crowd and they're looking to help. This is the way it was. There was people there that were certainly working. So I walked up to speak with one. It was almost as if she was behind a counter where you walk up to do business. I was confused as to exactly what this place was. It wasn't dark and dreary. And I say that because I've been to the lower places where it feels not so good energetically. It wasn't dark and dreary. It was well lit. But the feeling of it being a temporary junction was present, like it was a way station. The people that were there all looked young and beautiful. Many who were there looked relieved. And I'm talking about the people that were there outside of the helpers. I said to the woman who was behind the counter, as she warmly acknowledged me, "Where am I?" She paused for a brief moment, and I could feel it coming. She said, "This is where you come for death." Now, it's interesting because when I wrote this, I wrote it to be user-friendly. And I can't really explain because even though it felt like we were speaking in English, I almost felt like it was a different language. It's almost like she said, "This is death." And I say that because I could feel the statement coming before she said it. There was like something inside of me that was a little bit concerned. And I geared up to hear those words. And I have to say, even though I was having this out-of-body experience, it did freak me out just a bit. And when she said that, I think there was this response of loss of the body, and I reached out to grab her shoulders as she did me. Now, the reason why I did that was because in times past, when I've traveled and had these out-of-body experiences, if I didn't maintain my focus, I would just find myself right back in bed. We've all had those experiences where we've had even bad dreams where we're like, oh my gosh, and all of a sudden we're in our body and we're like, that was terrible. Well, in this case, I grabbed her shoulders as she did me. And then the strangest thing happened at that point. Her face began to fade. It was almost like, for those of you who remember the old TV days when we had just TV stations before cable, and at the end of the night, the TV station would kind of go to gray at a certain time. And you might wake up, you might fall asleep while there was TV or a movie was on or news. And then all of a sudden you would wake up to this white noise and this green. And it was almost like her face was starting to melt away to that. And I felt myself fading. And at that point, I had to sort of go to the mat. I had to sort of fight off that feeling within me. That was fear. And I used the same focus as I use in my meditative practice, that practice of Shambhavi Mudra where I focus on one point, and I use that in this moment. Even though everything began to fade, I began to fade, she began to fade, I was able to, and I think she helped me because she grabbed me as well, and I was able to stay. So I resisted that fear part, which is almost like fight or flight, and now I've come through it and I'm still there. And I wrote down that I wanted to stay for a bit to see what this place was. I wanted, in other words, instead of being totally afraid, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to die, and I'm back in my body sweating and oh, that was a terrible experience, I almost died. No, I wanted to stay there. I wanted to talk to them. They were friendly. They had life in them. There were all these people getting out of the wormhole transport tube. And I wanted to know, what is this place? And even though she said it something like, this is death, it wasn't this horrific thing when like someone comes to you and say, we have bad news. It wasn't like that at all. It was just heavy news in that sense. But once she saw that I had regained my composure, we resumed our conversation. And for those of you who know me, I like to talk. That's why I have this podcast, to get it out of my system. And if you're a friend of mine and I talk too much, I probably need to do more podcasts to get it out of my system, right? So just tell me, go do a podcast. Go take care of yourself. So we resumed our conversation. And then I playfully said to her, because she just said, this is where you go when you die. This is death. And then I said, I started talking along those lines. And I wrote down here that I was playful in the conversation. So I said, and this was kind of like tongue in cheek, joking a little bit. I said, so if someone were to revive, so if I was dead in my bed, for example, and someone went to revive my body, would I just poof disappear? And so she was there with 2 other workers. And at that point, the 3 of them sort of laughed and smiled. And then they said something along the lines, then they got serious and then said, no, we would need to get you a transport, or need to get a transport here quickly for you to return you. So I was still a bit shocked, but warming up to this whole concept of, afterlife, because we're so tied down to our body and our routine. And we, we wake up in the morning and we look in the mirror. And if you feel like sad, how you look in the morning when you're tired, it's only because you love yourself, right? I mean, right? Am I right? I mean, if you're disgusted in yourself, it's because you care. If you look at yourself and do all the things you do and try and make yourself look better, it's because you care. It's because you like being here. It's because you want to be in your body. You want to look your best. So I was still sort of shocked, but warming up to this idea of, okay, that other part of me back there is there, but I'm here right now. And so I looked around at the handful of people that were in the station. And then I asked them, this is the $28,000 question. Some of you are so young, you won't know what that means, but that refers back to an old show, an old game show. But this is the big question. I said to them, okay, so how long do we live here in this other existence? And she said 14,000 years, with a gentle confidence and pride. But the strange thing is the question seemed to be answered by a man who was there. And that's why I'm passing all these things along to you just straight as they came to me. Because even though I was talking to her, and it was almost like she answered, it was almost like as if the whole emphasis of the discussion shifted to this other guy. There was one guy and two girls who were working there. Helper beings, I called them. And I wrote down that the whole situation was solid more than fluid. I don't know why I wrote that, but, some of us, we wonder about what is it like in this other place? And we've heard people talk about the next world. We've heard about the colors being bright, just like I talked about the tunnel colors. We've heard about this other place being bigger than life itself than we know it down here. And so it made sense to me when I was writing this down to say, look, it was solid. It was real. It was solid more than it was fluid, even though when I was flying down that tunnel, it was very sci-fi-esque. And I know there's people out there thinking this is crazy. Look, I have friends who do ceremony and tinctures and certain things, and they have these experiences and they go, wow, it's great that you can have these without doing these other things. It's possible. Oh, I should mention, I find this absolutely fascinating. For those of you who are seekers and really love OBEs, NDEs, astral projection, you have to know that I had just got the Flower of Life book that has the Merkabah Meditation. And that night, I had only done one little part of it. I hadn't done the full. For those of you who know what this is about, this is like a light meditation where you have like these two triangles that are sort of in opposite directions. And we believe it's like a light thing that surrounds the body. But I had just done a meditation that I'd read out of that book. And the meditation was simply taking the energy, the awareness of your energy, which so often for me, because of the practice I do, is in Kutasha, the universal consciousness area, down, all the way down, throat chakra, then down to heart, and then into the physical heart itself. So I had been doing that meditation, which wasn't a deep meditation. It was more like I was playing with the energy and trying to move it down because I'm so used to having that energy top out in third eye area. And so I had been moving that energy down. And this is something, I find this fascinating that I had this experience that night, because many say that for those throughout history, the great sages, avatars, saints, gurus, teachers, they say that for those who have traveled, that they have traveled through this Merkabah. So anyways, may have had something to do with it. Maybe something that I need to look into more. And if you're interested in this, The Flower of Life, there's 2 volumes, and I believe it's the second that has the meditation that I was speaking of. So I looked around again. Oh, by the way, the place was solid more than fluid, but then I said, but still filled with mystery. There was a sense of awe and wonder, even though it was kind of like a subway station. I mean, in that sense, it was like the astral world, but it was more like a function, this like, end of a tube and here you are. It wasn't like, I've had experiences where you're out and there's actually, there's more, but this is more like inside. And so, but there was still mystery, a reverential mystery surrounding this place. So I looked around again and I noticed a woman walking sort of towards the area I was in. Apparently, she just got off of a subway stop, right? She just traveled down this tunnel. She looked, I could see her gestures. They were communicating relief. She was happy to be there. And as I looked at her, I thought she looked so young, so beautiful. And then the thought popped into my mind that, oh, she died so young. It's so sad, because I'm just assuming, hey, if this is where the place people go in intermediate juncture, it's kind of sad that she's here. She's so young. But then something spoke to me, that little still small recollection on the inside. And I realized as I looked around that everyone there was young and vibrant. So I saw this woman walking towards me. She looked relieved. And I also saw that that there was someone who was waiting for her. And that is important to me because, as you know, when you go to a juncture like this, or let's say you leave this life and go to the next existence, so many people that have had these experiences say, oh, there was my grandmother and there was this person or that. And so I think that's important to know. So the travels down the tunnel. So this experience went on, and it was just phenomenal. It didn't go on too much longer, but I want to say this. It ended, I think, it's interesting. As I shared the story just a minute ago with you, you might remember that it was my fear of losing the body that almost brought me back to my body. I believe the reason why I returned not too long after that was because I saw someone and I sort of shied away. And this was a situation where I think I needed to, take it head on. And so sometimes I wonder why our experiences like this end when they do. And so a lot of times I think we get to have them because we're ready, but then sometimes I think we have to come back because our readiness is ended at that point. Now, I will say this. I was so freaking amazed by this experience. I've had some out-of-body experiences. I've had the astral winds. I've seen wonderful things, but I was so just flabbergasted by this experience that it was really life-changing for me. It wasn't just, I never had a doubt in my mind that this had happened to me and that it wasn't a dream because of the way it all happened, because I felt the astral winds, because it was so powerful and dynamic as it was. Nothing like a dream, really like another world. And I was so excited after this happened. I thought, there's something about that 3:30 to 4:30 hour that, by the way, I did hear a video of a guru talking about it, and they actually have a word. I don't know if it's a Sanskrit word or a Hindi word, but there is actually a word for it that the gurus teach about, this hour, this sort of magical hour. And that's why so many of those teachers in the East recommend to their devotees that they get up early, and that they practice at this favorable hour. So what ended up happening was the next night, nothing happened. But I do have something more to share about this. 2 more journeys came, just nothing following night, but the next night after that. So 2 nights later, I had been thinking about this magical hour, and I thought, even though I'm feeling better and I'm not trying to escape my fever or my sickness, why not go to bed early? Why not wake up early like I did? Why not practice that Merkabah meditation like I did? Why not have intention to leave the body again, to have a traveling experience? After all, if you think about this stuff, this is life-changing. you could be anywhere on earth and be, it's almost like when someone talks about how joy and bliss are within you, and you can't buy, it's like, money can't buy you love. Well, money can't buy you bliss, and it can't buy you peace that passes all your mental faculties, or is at least above the mental faculties. Money can't buy you this. I mean, you could be anywhere on earth. You could be a pauper. You could be in prison. You could be anywhere, and you could have an experience like this that is so freaking radical. It's like sci-fi, but it's real. It's real. And the old me would not accept it. I mean, the old me, I think, would have probably listened to this podcast, but would have just thought deep down inside, yeah, I don't think so. But the new me, I know this happened. And then it happened 2 more times. As a matter of fact, I'm going to jump ahead. So 2 nights later, when I woke up early and I did my reading and I did my meditation and I went back and I focused on my hands and feet and I felt the buzz and I launched, I want to jump ahead. After the second journey in one night, I was pretty jazzed. I'm going again. I'm getting this down. I'm like, I don't know. That was probably a little pride and ego. I was like feeling like, hey, I'm learning how to master something new here. I'm out. I mean, I'm going again. I'm an astral traveler. And something inside me said, no. Check your hearing. And at that point I kind of paused and went more internally back to the body. And I realized that my ears were ringing, that I'd had enough that night. But the next, let me tell you about those 2 traveling experiences. They were fantastic. Instead of looking up to the third eye after I left the body, I looked up prior to leaving. I don't know if that means that I launched out of my third eye chakra. It's hard to say. This is not a podcast where I'm absolutely positive about everything. This is a podcast where I am a spiritual seeker, a journey person, and birds of a feather flock together. I'm looking for people who are on the same journey. I'm looking for people who want to be part of the podcast and share their experiences. If you've had an out-of-body experience, a near-death experience, and you would like to share in the podcast, definitely write in the comments below. Send me a chat. Contact me on WhatsApp. Say something. And because really what I'm looking for is collaboration. So we can all figure it out together. But what I do know, I think that most likely I probably shot out of the third eye chakra. And it makes me wonder if the chakra that you leave leads you to where you go. Because that night that I went twice in one night, both times I looked up to my third eye, and both times I was shot into what looked like something beautiful out of an astronomy book. It was just gorgeous. It was like it was in a stellar situation. It was just beautiful. And I was free, and I was like in the universe. I would say it looked more akin to our physical universe than an astral universe. I felt like the tunnel I was in, I felt like that was an astral world. I was in my astral body. Anyways, 2 more journeys, 2 days later. And if anything, what it taught me was that this stuff is real. The people in the movie theaters who show you the wormholes, the Hereafter movie with Matt Damon, you see the lady who gets hit in the head after the tsunami hits, and she gets hit, when she's in the water, and she sees those figures of people, all this stuff. These CGI folks, the people who work for the movies, they're doing one of 2 things. Either they're imitating something they saw someone else do, but it goes back to an original person who actually saw something, who actually experienced something. Could have been through ayahuasca ceremony or whatever, or it could have been through a real intense, energetic type of meditative practice. But these things are amazing, and they're real. We have this gross, dense body that seems to be solid matter, but underneath it all is whirling atoms of molecules of energy that apparently, according to the quantum field scientists, that information and those particles are dependent somehow on our mind. So, we live in these bodies of energy, and as we go up from the physical body to the astral body, it's a finer substance, and then the causal body, even more fine. All I can say is, whatever path you've chosen, if you've chosen a spiritual path, and it doesn't even have to, your spiritual path might be aspiritual, like in other words, you abhor spiritual talk or spiritual affiliations, that's fine. And so your path might be aspiritual in that sense. And so if it is, that's fine. As long as we're all going somewhere, we don't even have to go to the same place. Hopefully we're progressing. But whatever path you choose, hopefully it'll get you more and more in touch with the more subtle elements of the body and this existence. Because the physical body, as much as it is filled with energy, the real part that we all share together is what I would call the fabric of consciousness. That awareness, that soul essence that resides within the body, the animating force. When someone passes away and you look at them after they've passed, it looks like a house with no lights on. The animated force, that soul awareness, that consciousness has left that body. And so the animation is gone. The liveliness, the vitality is gone. We want to get closer, instead of focusing so much on the physical body, as wonderful it is with the whirling atoms and molecules, we want to get closer to the source, the energy that is in every person, that soul essence, that universal consciousness, the fabric of consciousness that is within me is the same fabric of consciousness that is within you. The only difference is, what are we doing with it? We don't even have to go down, I shared with you, an astral travel experience today. We don't even have to go down the path of astral travel. That's not even required. Although I think we're all going to be forced into it at some point. That's the feeling I got when I went down that tunnel. But that's not the point. We don't have to all go down, the same exact practices and paths. That's something we're coming out of that mentality. Have you noticed that? That those who are hanging on to that old mentality are hanging on to old wineskins. You can't put the new stuff in the old. It just won't hold it anymore. Those days are over. We can't say to one another, this is the way you got to do it. And if you don't do my way, then take the highway. You can't say don't, take the highway. That's tribalism. That's paganism in the sense of, God is mad. And no, God is love. So, and God is a mystery. I kind of don't want to go too much into it, but, think about it like this. What if the divine being, what if we were all just like cells in this multi-universe, multi-reality state? What if we were all just cells in the so-called, for lack of a better term, body of the divine? And you and I, as much as maybe a cell is not necessarily me, but it's part of me, what if that were the case? There is such beauty and wonder in this life. And I shared the flying down the tunnel experience with you. The reason why I didn't share it right away, because it wasn't, it was a sacred moment. It's kind of embarrassing. It's kind of like sharing your home with someone, it's a special thing, but I share it with you because I want you to know that these things are real, and that when you go in to get your coffee or tea tomorrow morning, you might be surprised who the person is next to you. You might be surprised that maybe they, even as normal looking and as grounded as you might think they are to the earth and to this sense and sensibility, maybe they have had radical spiritual experiences, esoteric, experiences that no one could quite describe. They're normally not shared. It's kind of like sharing your love life with someone. Maybe at the most you do it with your best friend or something like that. These are sacred experiences. Why did I, bear all? Well, I did because, my goal is for people to know that there's more than just this life, in the sense of, just this earth and this body. So many people so attached just to this physical existence. So many people that, don't really think about these other mysteries of life, of the subtle bodies that somehow reside within the physical body, or within or without. So many possibilities in this life, things to be done, things to see. We're going to have answers for all of it soon enough. Yeah. Yeah. We're going to have answers, not the kind of answers, that maybe organized spiritual groups have given in the past. We're going to have answers that are powerful, experiential, and scientific answers. We will be able to start to quantify subtle bodies. We already started to, when Kirlian photography was introduced, accidentally found, discovered. We started to see auric fields. We started to see that there was more to a leaf and even a penny. They all have auras. I mean, I know a lot of my friends in organized religion believe that animals don't have souls. Well, why do they have auric fields? I mean, even there's energy emanating from pretty much everything, even rocks, wood, dead or alive. I'm excited to share the journey on the Streams of Light podcast. If you've been watching on Facebook Live, thank you so much. And like the podcast as well as on YouTube Live. For those of you on Twitter, thanks for joining me. And Twitch, I don't know. It's a gaming site for the most part. So if you're on Twitch and you're watching me, you must be really, really bored. But hey, maybe you want to fly down a tunnel too. So if that floats your boat, then follow the podcast. Keep in touch. Send me a message. And we'll catch you next time around. This is Streams of Light Podcast. I'm Chris Anthony. Take care. Have a good day.